Especially strangers like these, Moonies.
We've fished here for years. We don't need Mr. Moon, who talks to fish, to come on the hook for bait. We don't believe in his lunatic ways. And we wish he would get up and pack his bag and leave.
At one time, Savo...
Sun Myung Moon. Congressional committees have investigated Reverend Moon. There have been allegations of political corruption that involved the church in the so-called Koreagate scandal. For the most part, Americans perceive the church as one of those strange cults, something sinister, a threat to the susceptibilities of young America. Well, it seems that the church, apart from trying to win hearts and minds, is engaged in an even bigger crusade to take over one of the oldest and most valuable resources of this country, its fishing industry. And the place Reverend Moon has chosen to flaunt his power and his wealth is the oldest fishing port in the nation, Gloucester, Massachusetts. Gloucester, its name, its look, is synonymous with the sea. For more than 350 years, Gloucester has been sending its sons down to the sea in ships to gather the bounty of the Georges Bank, one of the richest fishing areas in the world. It is not an easy life, but generation after generation, the Gloucestermen have gone forth, fathers and sons, people strongly Catholic of Irish or Italian or Portuguese extraction, and all of them Yankee to the core. They are proud of themselves and their work, and they do not easily embrace strangers. Especially strangers like these in new boats, big and small, boats owned and piloted by members of the Unification Church, Moonies. The term used to be pejorative, but now even the Moonies call themselves Moonies.
Waterfront gossip will tell you that they are glassy-eyed zombies brainwashed and robbed by the Korean arms merchant and preacher who says he is the successor to Jesus, God's new messenger to mankind. Waterfront gossip will also tell you that he is bent on taking over Gloucester's, the nation's, the world's fishing industry.
The Moonies seem to have so much money that eventually the fishermen are going to have two choices. They're going to either have to bargain with them or starve to death. And these fishermen that have been fishing all their lives, not too many even know how to do anything else but fish. So if it can happen in a town like this, it can happen anywhere.
The Reverend Moon himself has a particular fondness for Gloucester, keeps a boat here, often spends weekends here. But he has a particular distaste for having his picture taken. He's almost presidential the way he surrounds himself with bodyguards. One of the most outraged of Gloucester's outraged citizens is the mayor, Leo Alper, a man of some substance in Gloucester and generally agreed to be a legitimate character. Every morning of the week, he holds court in Uncle Moe's Diner.
Who ever heard of a religious god owning 150 corporations and running them? And what kind of religion is that? You either pray to God or you pray to the register.
You said some time ago that the Moonies would have strap marks on their ass before they got anywhere in this town.
Right.
You're eating your words, right?
Well, their permits will be hard to get, I'll say that right now. And I'm not discriminating. They've got to be...
What are you doing?
Oh, no, they've got to be letter of the law. In other words, like everybody else.
Or a little bit better.
Or a little bit better. Yeah, you're right.
The move into Gloucester began quietly 2 years ago when agents of a company called International Seafood bought 3 acres of land in a little cove back there. They said they were going to build some kind of maritime academy. Well, it turns out that International Seafood is a Moon company.
Which also bought out the Gloucester Lobster Company and its valuable waterfront property. The company was the biggest lobster operation in town. And right next door, Bob's Clam Shack, a landmark restaurant. The Gloucester attorney who witnessed the sale was Peter Cahill, who also works for the city.
It was simply a transfer of the deed, Morley, and a check in return.
A certified check?
Yes, a bank check.
For how much?
Very nicely done. That's a matter of public record, so I can tell you it was $650,000.
Just like that?
Just like that.
Earlier, a New Hampshire couple, church followers, bought this 14-room house. They then sold it to the church for $1. It is now a Moon dormitory. But the purchase that truly outraged Gloucester was this one. This mansion and its grounds, which the Reverend Moon's representative proudly shows off to visitors. This place that once held quiet contemplation for a Boston Irish cardinal. Richard Cardinal Cushing used it as a retreat. The Order of the Daughters of Mary of the Immaculate Conception used it. Then last summer, the Catholic Church sold it to an out-of-town businessman for $1 million. A day later, he sold it to the Unification Church for $1,100,000. The buyer was merely an agent for Reverend Moon. It was this sale that made Gloucester men and women feel that Reverend Moon had declared religious and economic war on them. They looked to other big Moon operations elsewhere. In Bayou La Batre, Alabama, the church moved in and bought a dry dock business and a shipyard. Their main customer is the church itself. Its own fishing fleet that works out of Bayou La Batre and other Gulf Coast ports. In Kodiak, Alaska, it owns dockland and an enormous fish processing plant built at a cost of $3 million. And the church is in business one way or another in just about every important fishing port in the country.
57.6. I'm running 4 shipyards in Alabama and Mississippi. And I got 3 seafood plants.
Where?
One in Alabama, one in Virginia, and well, this little one here now.
Paul Werner, the man in charge of the church's maritime operations, a Moonie himself, sees no end to the church's expansion.
We also have a little fleet in the Gulf. We got a couple of boats here. We got some on the West Coast. Of course, internationally, we have a few more. And then all kinds of small things like ice plants and net shops, stuff like that.
Are you going to expand your enterprises here in Gloucester?
Well, if there's anything available, we'll be ready. Sure.
But sometimes it is very hard to tell where the church ends and where a church business begins.
Well, there are many Catholics, Mormons, and others, and all kinds of industries, even own banks and whatever.
I understand, but it's usually easier to draw the line between the church and the bank.
Well, then draw it here, too.
But all the plants and enterprises are one way or another related to the church, involved with the church.
Well, our corporations are owned by other corporations, and those corporations are owned by other corporations again, and so on.
Have you been able to find out exactly how the church business is financed?
No. If I could answer that, I think I'd be perhaps the only one in the country. It's that complex. He literally has hundreds of corporate entities. I think what frightens us is his financial ability to wave the kind of money around that we've talked about earlier and simply buy without mortgages, without any obvious effort, a great deal of property.
One very visible effect of the church in Gloucester is the lobster business. When the church moved in, it paid lobstermen higher prices than competing processors. The competition quickly folded. Now the Moonies dictate the going rate. They are the only wheel in town.
You can't cut off your nose to spite your face. I wish they weren't here, but what are you gonna do?
I'm not happy with them all. I'd rather not see them here. But I think the fishermen don't have a choice but to sell to them. And if the city government, if the mayor wants to do something about it, then they should develop another market for the lobster. I mean, what's a fisherman supposed to do?
Much bigger than lobstering is Gloucester's ground fishing business. Haddock, cod, flounder. For years, the Gloucester boats have been selling their fish to a group of packing companies that line the waterfront. The companies, like the boats, are small family enterprises.
There was all these rumors that they were going to get 25 boats and 30 boats and, you know, take one corner of the fishing grounds right over for themselves. I really didn't believe it. And individual Moonies are good guys, but now I'm beginning to believe that they are, their ultimate view is to get a monopoly around here.
Let's say that they bought property and you were tying up to their what? Well, there's a tie-in right there. All they got to say is, well, if you don't sell to me at my price, then you can't tie here. Then where are you going to go?
You belong to him?
Do I belong to him? No.
Oh, good. regular. That's all we need. Another God.
If you had to choose a city less likely to be interested in a Korean-inspired religion with a living, breathing Messiah, then you would have to choose Gloucester with its very traditional Catholic church and an equally strong attachment by that church with a seafaring life. The church is called Our Lady of Good Voyage, and the Virgin bears a fishing boat in her arms. So these are not people easily enticed by a faith whose leader says plainly he wants to subjugate the world.
In terms of the children of this town, I think they're pretty tough, independent, good kids, and I'm not completely in fear as to the Reverend's ability to tamper with them, though a problem for some, I'm sure. I'm concerned essentially with his taking over the waterfront.
What concerns a lot of people in Gloucester also concerns a lot of people in Washington, and that is that the tax-exempt money taken in by the church part of the church goes to build up the business part of the church. And that business is really a multinational empire by now. Furthermore, most of the people working for church enterprises are themselves Moonies, and those people are said to give back a large part of their salaries as tax-deductible donations to the church, thus providing a church-run enterprise with almost free labor, and allowing that enterprise to undercut its non-church competition.
I myself don't believe there is such a thing as a unification church. I think it's one of the greatest schemes that come to the country, and the quicker that this country and this state realizes it, that they can drive Mr. Moon back from where he come from.
Gus Foote is a city councilman from the Waterfront District.
And I'm going to continue to be right on his ass, whether he likes it or not. And I kind of enjoy being on someone like him, because he seems to come in here and saying in Gloucester that the fishermen of Gloucester, I want to save them. We've fished here for years. We have all the technologies that we need. We don't need Mr. Moon, who talks to fish, to come on the hook for bait. We don't believe in his lunatic ways. And we wish he would get up and pack his bag and leave.
The man who speaks for the Unification Church in these parts is Aidan Barry, a transplanted Irishman, a lapsed Catholic. Barry supervises the New England branch of the church. When you talk to him about who owns what, you get unclear answers.
The church itself does not own any businesses. There's no legal or monetary direct connection between the church and the businesses.
But the members involved in the businesses put the money back into the church as private tax-deductible donations.
Oh, yes.
And its members may own businesses.
The members may own businesses, and they may be involved in the businesses, and if they want to give their salary to the church, it's their prerogative. 5 or 6 different government agencies have investigated our church and all its aspects, and we have never been brought to court on any of these issues. Actually, most of the businesses are in their embryonic stage, so I think they're probably struggling to pay off their bank debts.
Bank debts? You came here, you bought this place for cash? No bank debt. You bought the lobster business for cash? You bought the restaurant for cash?
But a lot of the stuff we own is actually mortgaged.
Barry's in my office the other day, and I says to him, you know, for a guy that sleeps in a sleeping bag, that's a pretty good suit you got on. I was in the business years ago. Suit had to go for $500. And so he says the Reverend bought that for me for Christmas. And the Mercedes outside, that goes with the Reverend, too? Come on, you don't see priests driving Mercedes with $500 suits. Rabbis, aren't you get a rabbi here and there that grabs 35 grand, he prays good. But that's a different story. They're not taking kids.
Do you, honest to goodness, believe that a Korean arms manufacturer who is now heavily involved in the world's fishing industry is the Messiah?
I know Reverend Moon very well. I've played pool with him, I talk with him, I dine with him. To me, he's an exceptional man, but an ordinary mortal man, just like anybody else. But he is the prophet who is opening up the door of perfection for man today.
The city of Gloucester is not the place that he's going to save. And any time that he thinks that he is the second coming of Christ, then he's got to be a lunatic.
If the Unification Church is, as many people allege, not a church at all, but a business, how come the IRS and the courts and the Congress have not come down hard upon it?
That question goes to the very heart of the founding of this country. The first lines of the First Amendment state that Congress shall pass no law that prohibits the free exercise of any religion. So you wouldn't have to be a very good lawyer to defend the Moonies on First Amendment grounds.
If we are to be investigated on First Amendment issues, I do think all other churches should be.
So for the moment, the Moonies, church or business or both, will prevail here in Gloucester and probably elsewhere as well.